And we are live. Welcome to Olivia's Stories, ladies and gentlemen. Story number 1. I got baited by my own husband, and now he is mad and angry just because I ended up doing exactly what he told me to do. Whatever happened to never biting more than you can chew? He thought I would chicken out so he could taunt me for as long as he wanted, but I refused, and now he is mad at me. He is trying to make life difficult for me, but it's not my fault that he decided to bring up a dar, and now he's the one that chickened out. I know that he's trying to dump me, and that's why I'm here on Reddit to ask you all if what I did was wrong. He has visited almost every single family member of mine to complain about me. Not once in any of his complaints did he state or agree that he had anything to do with my decision. He's just trying to play dumb and act like he didn't bait me into doing what I did. My name is Lupita, and I'm a 28-year-old African-American living in New Jersey. I work at a restaurant as a chef and baker. Unfortunately, I can't mention the name of the restaurant I work at. I'm married to a 32-year-old restaurant owner called Frederick. My husband is the owner of the restaurant I work at. I know it's a very weird setup, but unfortunately, I find myself in such a situation. I actually met Frederick at his restaurant, and I didn't even know he owned the restaurant. In case some people will try to make it seem like I married Frederick because he's a restaurant owner, let me just put it out there that I never had any of those intentions. I actually come from a well-to-do family, and my parents provided me with more than enough. I married out of love. It was never about the money for me. I just finished my internship before I met Frederick at the restaurant. I was literally just stopping by for lunch with my friends, and then he walked in. He had other workers, but that day, he casually strolled in and just walked up to the counter. My friends noticed I liked him immediately, and I didn't even try to hide it. By that time, I didn't even know he was the owner. I thought he was a regular customer. It was only a few days later, after that restaurant suddenly became my favorite restaurant because of him. Lal and I visited it almost every day that I found out he owned it. We became friends and hit it off pretty quickly. That is just the story of how we met. But now I guess we're about to become worst enemies, lol. We got married 2 years after dating, and it was a very weird kind of wedding. If you ask me why, I'll just tell you that it was because my family and his family are not really the highest fans of each other. I don't even need to pretend, so I'll get straight to the point. I don't like his mother at all. That woman just picks at me every chance she gets, so I don't like her. She also seems to dislike me just as much as I dislike her, but we pretend to like each other at family functions when it's completely necessary. My father doesn't really like Frederick because, according to him, owning a restaurant is not a real job as far as you solely depend on your customers' turnout, which can change any time. But even though we have a rough family relationship, we loved each other too much to let our family get in the way, so that's how we ended up married. I've been married to Frederick for 3 years now, but we don't have a child together yet. If you ask me why, I'll just tell you it's because I'm not really ready to have children yet. It's my body and it's my choice. Frederick never had a problem with that, and he's been very supportive in that regard. I started working at his restaurant just 6 months after we got married. I used to work with my dad before, but I decided to work with Frederick instead because I knew that he was not comfortable with me being on my dad's payroll when the both of them are not really friends. I like working with my husband, and it started off as a weird experience, but I was able to get used to it. Now, I think I'm going to be jobless in the next few weeks, because I'm very certain that my husband and I are going to break up. Or, let me just put it this way, I'm very sure that Frederick is going to dump me. You all have waited enough, so let me tell you what's going on and how we got to this place we are currently at. Even though all through the beginning of this write-up, I've sounded like a stuck-up lady, I'm not like that at all. It's all talk and no action because I'm actually a very conservative person. I'm not wild and I don't explore things every day. I'm just very opinionated, and I talk about my opinions, but I never really speak about it. My husband knows I'm a talkative, and I am very active at home, but not in the public space. I used to be that girl that likes to explore before, but I grew out of it before I got married. My conservative nature and nonchalantness has grown bigger over the past few years, and my husband has noticed too. He's always asking me why I suddenly stopped attending parties with him and whatnot. Sometimes, Frederick accused me of being too shy. I'm not shy, and it's far from it. I always tell him that, but he never believes me. I know myself, and I know that one reason that I don't do any wild stuff anymore is because I feel like I should act differently since I'm married and that I shouldn't really let myself get out of character. Another reason is because I'm a rebellious child, and I've always been a rebellious child. I've not done any wild things in the past, but my parents always taunt me and tell me that I like to do the opposite of what I'm told. That's why they believe I rebelled against them by marrying Frederick. I kind of just grew out of my rebellious phase and decided to be more calm and put together. I've tried to explain this to my husband several times, but he just doesn't get it. Our discussions about the way I was shy in public always gets me annoyed, and that's because he always takes it too far. If I say he takes it too far, then that's because it's the truth. I have a very big sense of humor, so anything that annoys me is really annoying, lol. Frederick suddenly became this guy that's interested in clubs and nights out. He wasn't like that while we dated and for the early years of our marriage. I think the issue is that both of us just turned into the exact opposite of ourselves. I used to think that was a good thing because we helped each other find ourselves, but I guess that's a very bad thing. Frederick began to invite me to clubs that he was invited to. At first, I didn't care about attending any of those clubs, but then I realized that there was every possibility of me getting cheated on if I just let my husband go to nightclubs alone. I wanted to blend in and be the Gen Z wife, so I thought, why not? We don't have children yet, so going to clubs all night wasn't a big deal. But I didn't expect Frederick to actually expect me to participate in the clubbing. My main reason for going was to keep an eye on him and make sure that he wasn't doing anything absurd. I also wanted to support my husband and engage in activities with him because I've been told that's what supportive partners do. That's how I found myself in the absurd situation that's going to cause our marriage now. Explore. That word means a lot more than it should me. Frederick wanted us to explore, and now we're exploring the prospects of getting divorced. Please forgive me, guys, if you find my sense of humor too annoying. I just can't help it. I'm at the verge of getting divorced, and I still can't help but make jokes even as I write this. I have to be fast because my mom has invited me to the house to ask my side of the story. Apparently, Frederick had also visited my parents, and now they want to hear from me first. Thankfully, my dad is not a big fan of Frederick, and he doesn't associate with him a lot, so that means he'll obviously believe me before he even gives Frederick a chance to speak. Now let's get back to what we're saying. So Frederick and I decided to go to the parties together, but he had a problem with me not dancing like the rest of the girls. I told him I'm not ready for that kind of fun yet, and I tried to make him understand that it would not be proper for me to act that way in front of his friends. He never listened to me at all. Frederick owns a restaurant, but he doesn't need to be present every day. Eek his wife, so I don't need to report to work every day. So, we can party all night if we want. And that's what we started doing. I just followed him for a show and I never got involved. Frederick complained at first, but as time went on, he stopped. One of the things I like about him is his ability to listen to me and give up when he notices that I'm not really into something. I always liked that about him, her. Recently, it seems like he's decided to do the exact opposite of what he used to do before. Initially, it was just a joke between us. It was never anything serious, and we always just joked about it. Sometimes the joke gets to me, and I get really frustrated. I mean, I'm a wife, so I obviously get affected when my husband compares to other women. No woman would like that, and even though I act very nonchalant and hardcore, I'm not that nonchalant. I always laughed it off, but began to get to me, and then I started resenting the jokes he made. At some point, I needed to get everything off my chest, so I decided to speak to one of my sisters about it. I have 3 sisters and a stepbrother. My sisters and I are very close, and they are all married. I'm the firstborn girl, but I got married last. I wonder why, lol. I'm closer to Nadia, my immediate younger sister, and so I spoke to her about my condition with Frederick. We initially laughed about it because it was a very weird and unlikely situation, but as time went on, I realized that speaking to my sister about it made me realize that I might have been overacting. So, I decided to calm down and just give it a try. I promised myself to make Frederick see my point of view without causing a bridge between us. My sister also advised me not to say no the next time he asked. I also wanted to give Frederick a taste of his medicine by showing him that I'm just respecting him by not engaging his taunts. It was a joke to us, and my sister and I never took it seriously. But I guess not, the situation is extremely serious. 3 weeks ago, my husband got invited to his best friend's bachelor party. My husband decided that it would be nice to invite me too, and I agreed without a single thought. It was 2 days after agreeing that I realized that I might have made the wrong choice. I realized that the bachelor party was something the groom had organized for the guts, but he gave them permission to invite their partners if they wanted. I heard that his reason was because he didn't want any of his friends' wives accusing him of making their husbands do crazy things. In other words, he didn't want to be the cause of anyone's broken marriage. The bride also organized her own bachelor party or bridal shower. Whatever it is called, I don't really know. But I don't really know the bride, and I'm not close to her, so I thought it was best to attend the groom's bachelor party, since he's the one I'm close to. The party was 2 weeks ago, and I got ready for it for days. The party took place at a hotel just a few minutes' drive away from our house, so there was no reason for us to travel anywhere. I heard it was a customer-themed party, so I decided to go as my favorite character in The Queen's Gambit. I had no particular reason for going as a movie character. I just wanted to be different. My husband went as something I'm not really familiar with, and I don't remember who he tried to emulate. Anyway, we got dressed and got ready for the party quite early. I didn't plan on wearing a mask, and I didn't even buy one because I didn't believe that it would look good on my dress. I actually dyed my hair red just because I wanted to get into the character quite well. The only difference was that I didn't curl or try to make it look like any of those royal-themed ones. I just left his street and tied it into a high ponytail. When we arrived at the party, I immediately knew that I had made the wrong decision. Everything was wild, and a lot of things were going on all at once. I couldn't believe that a person that planned to get married the next day was throwing something so controversial. I, for one, was very happy that I didn't let Frederick go alone. It would have really made me quite angry if he came back and showed me the pictures and videos of the wild party he attended alone. To all the girls out there, both single and married or in a relationship, never let your man or future man go to a bachelor's party alone. He needs supervision because the thing that goes on at bachelor parties nowadays, just too chaotic and extra. I'm not in a position to give advice because I am currently going through the consequences of entertaining a bachelor's party. But I guess it is easier to advise other people, don't you think? So let me get back to the main point now. When we attended the party, I realized that there were actually masks there and it was compulsory for us to wear them. I've seen many such things like that in movies, and I knew it never ended well. I told my husband we shouldn't do it because it would be hard to recognize each other, but he told me it would be disrespectful to the HOs if we refused to follow the protocol. So, he took one of the lighters that we arranged on the table I assumed was dedicated to people interested in smoking, and then he used it to burn the edges of our masks so it would be easier for us to recognize each other. He didn't want to burn mine at first because he stated that it wouldn't be hard to locate me since I was literally the only one wearing the type of fustum I chose. Yes, guys, I ended up being as different as I anticipated I'd be. His was important because the kind of costume he wore was similar to most of the ones that were worn by other people. I knew that even with the burnt masks, I'd still find it hard to locate him. I was worried about that at first, but Frederick assured me that we wouldn't even need to look for each other, because we would be standing together all through. That calmed me down a little, and then I decided to relax and just have fun, even though I was completely sure that partying in the midst of sweaty people was not my thing. 7th% of the people in attendance at that bachelor party were men, and that spooked me out at the beginning. Even though the groom told his married male friends to bring their partners to the party, it was still male-dominated because some of them didn't care to invite their partners or not. Many of his friends were married. I don't know which one it was, but I just know that I saw more men with short, low-cut hair than I saw women with their long hair. Or maybe I just couldn't tell their genders because everyone was wearing a mask and costume. I don't really know. I held on tight to Frederick at first, but I later let go of him and let him interact with his friends. He took off his mask to interact with his friends, but I kept kind on. I actually started having fun at the party, and it was very shocking to me. I didn't even have to dance or interact to have fun. I just sat and watched how crazy people can be. Most times my mouth was left open because of how much weird stuff I saw. I didn't even care that I was one of the very few people that just sat down and observed everything. I didn't have a problem with that because I was just fine observing. It was even better that I could not see their faces and they could not see that I was staring. I still remember everything and the loud music that almost made me deaf. I had fun at the beginning and I can't deny it. Well, only at the beginning because the party didn't even go well for me at all. At some point into the party, the groom grabbed a I didn't even know was there and made an announcement. He said there was going to be a game of truth or dare at the party, and he needed volunteers. Let me just tell you guys that while the groom was making the announcement, I just sat down and munched on the snacks I was served and sipped on my drink, even though I didn't even know what was mixed inside. I didn't even think of being a participant, and it never crossed my mind that I would need to participate in something like that. I was initially just excited to watch what everyone would do, and I was racking my brain to think of the possible games he would make people play. That's why I actually got surprised when Frederick came to my side and asked me to go volunteer and play the truth or dare game. I knew it was Frederick because I had to remove his mask and do a double take even after I saw the burnt edges on the mask. I actually asked him if he was crazy because I knew that I was not going to do what he was asking me to do. I'd not heard of any husband that would give his wife permission to volunteer for a truth or dare game when he knew what kind of stuff went on in such games. Frederick actually told me he was serious and that he really wanted me to participate in the game. I boldly told him no because it was not something I was interested in at all. He pulled me to the side and decided to taunt me. He asked me if it was wrong for him as a man to want his woman to do something crazy. He started pointing to the wives of his friends and how some of them were already standing with the groom and volunteering to play the game. I told him I was different and that I would never play a truth or dare game with strangers. He didn't budge or try to change his words. He decided to date me to go volunteer, or else he'd know that I was trying to chicken out and that I was just looking for an excuse to get on his nerves. Well, after hearing that from my own husband, I didn't think twice before deciding to give him a taste of his medicine. I remembered the discussion I had with my sisters and how she always encouraged me never to give him a reason to compare me with other women. I didn't want to do it, but just because I was tired of constantly getting compared and taunted, I decided to do it. I also wanted to show him that just because I refused to do certain things and respect his name didn't mean that I was a fool. I asked him to give me $200 before going in $300 when I finished. It was my only condition for getting into the game. He agreed, but made sure he told me just how much he didn't believe that I'd actually play the game. I left him standing alone and went to join the people that were volunteering to play the game. My husband kept giving me thumbs up even before the hand started, but I didn't even care to answer him. I was very angry, and I am still angry. It just made very little sense to me that he wasn't even appreciating the fact that I wanted to be faithful to him and not try to disrespect him or cross boundaries. Any man in his shoes would have been very happy to have a wife whose character and morals didn't contradict with the boundaries that a marriage was supposed to have. He didn't know that I could be extra if I wanted to and that I just didn't want to. At that point, I already had everything to the extreme and I was not ready to have more of it. All I wanted to do was just put an end to his unnecessary comparisons and baits. A part of me also wanted to teach him a big lesson, and now that I've seen what my actions are making him do, I'm quite certain that I really did teach him a very big lesson. The game had been open to both the men and the women, and everyone had been open to play the game. But for some reason, the men dominated the game, and my guess was because the men's population had outdid the one of the women. We were 15 in total that volunteered to play the game, and we were divided into 5 groups with 3 people in each team. My team had 2 men, and I was the only woman on the team. I'd never seen such a truth or dare game where the players were divided into teams, but that was the first time I saw something like that. We all had our masks on as required by the host. At first, everyone just chose the truth because they were scared of being given a very controversial game to play. But the rules were changed and dare was very compulsory. At first, my team members were kind enough to play the game for me and take drinks on my behalf, but it was soon my turn and I could not hide any longer. I was dared to kiss one of the men in another team. It wasn't just any type of kids. It was meant to be a French kiss, and there was no getting out of it. Since my team members had helped me most of the game, I had to do it. I had the choice of taking a drink, but I refused. I didn't want to take a drink because at that moment, I was extremely angry at Frederick. I just hated everything he did to me, and I decided to kiss the guy in front of me. Yes, I did what I did. I gave him a French kiss, and that was it. I didn't even give it a second thought because I wanted to let loose, like you told me to let loose. He has been disturbing me so much, and that was why I decided to give him a taste of his medicine. After I did what I did, I looked up, and I saw my husband without his mask. He was very angry as he looked at me, and I could tell that he had been furious that I did not refuse the dare. His friend was even talking to him, but he didn't bother to answer his friend. He just walked out of the party furiously. I didn't even try to run after him. I just removed my mask and rolled my eyes. His friends recognized me as his wife, and they were also surprised that I had taken the dare. Some of them could not even hide the shock on their faces. I don't know, got to explain that feeling to you guys because it was just a lot. I didn't have to run after Frederick to know that he had been angry after what I did. I knew that he was very furious with my actions and he wanted to react by just walking out. I felt very victorious because I gave him the taste of the medicine he had been giving me. How could a person be as stupid as Frederick was? What did he think I would do when he kept daring me to go and play a game of truth or dare? Did he expect me to just stand and watch him trample all over me? Who bites their wife and then expects them to be as innocent as a clear water? Well, guys, I didn't give him that opportunity and I did what I did. Do I regret it? No. I don't regret it because if I was the one telling my husband to go play a game of truth or dare, society will accuse me of asking him to cheat on me. I kissed a stranger and I did so with my head up high. I left the party only after it ended. I stayed back and had enough drinks and food. If I kept being asked to let loose, it was only time till I actually let loose. His friends kept walking up to me and asking where he was. I don't think there's anyone there who didn't know about what happened between me and Frederick that night. The fact that he was no longer in the room after I kissed a guy just explained everything that happened between us. They kept meeting me and urging me to go look for him. I didn't bother looking for him because it did not make sense that he suddenly chickened out after dating me not to chicken out. There are many parties I'd wanted to walk out on, but I refused just because I accompanied him. But he wanted to take things extra and I complied. I later discovered that Frederick left in his car about an hour before I left the party. One of his friends offered to drop me off, but I refused and just took a cab. When I got to the house, I came to the house. I came home to trouble, literally. Frederick just started arguing immediately. I dropped key purse on the table. He asked me in his exact words, "How dare you kiss another guy while I was in the room? How dare you even kiss another guy?" Of course, I didn't keep quiet and just look at him like they do. I'm those daily soaps. I spoke up for myself and told him how he literally frustrated me and led to do what I did. The action was done by me, but everything that led to it was my husband's fault, and I told him that straight to his face. He accused me of cheating on him and disrespecting him in his friends present, and he told me that I had been looking for an excuse to cheat on him. I asked him what he was really expecting when he baited me to go play a truth or dare game at a bachelor's party with adults. I had to ask him if he expected me to go there and play Cinderella. Frederick kept looking for excuses that questioned my character and paint me out as a bad person, but I refused. Frederick told me he was just not ready to accept my reasons for kissing another guy in his presence, and I told him that I was not ready to accept his reasons for baiting his wife to a truth or dare game. I didn't apologize because I didn't think that he deserved one, and that seemed to only trample on his ego more. I could tell that he hated my attitude and the way I refused to accept I was wrong. He wanted an apology, and I just promised myself that I was never going to give him one. So Frederick grabbed a pillow and a blanket, and then he threw them out for me and locked himself in the bedroom so I couldn't come out. I mean, how messed up is that? He's the one that didn't want to sleep in the same room with me. Why did he have to pick me out like that? Wasn't he supposed to be the one that left the room? I decided to just forget about it and sleep in the guest room. The next morning, I discovered that Frederick left the house before I even woke up, and for the past 2 weeks, he's left the house before I woke up and came back when I slept. I just realized that he's been visiting anyone that cares to listen, and he's been trying to trample on my character and make me give in. I've gotten calls from some of my sisters and even my stepbrother. I mean, I don't get why he's telling them instead of telling me. If I've offended you, do much, have a conversation with me. Stop trying to recruit people so that they can follow you and try paint me as the one who's wrong. I've gotten calls from his mother and siblings, and I know his mother is finally happy that the wrong girl her son married is finally showing her true colors. I heard that's what she's been saying around the house. I got so frustrated that I started writing this because I just needed to tell people. Frederick is frustrating me. It's actually annoying. It got worse today when I got a call from my parents. Both of them, especially my mother, have asked to see me, and I was supposed to be there yesterday, but I decided to go today. Now, I got carried away writing this, and I've noticed that time is not on my side anymore. I'll have to cancel and go tomorrow. Update. Well, my life gets more complicated, I guess. So, I spoke to my parents, and they told your husband visited them and told them I kissed another man. My father asked me if it was true, and I said yes. He asked me why I disrespected my husband, and I just told him that it was a truth or dare game, and Frederick dared me to play it. I didn't tell him the full story because I was aware that my father was looking for an opportunity to tell me how right he was about me marrying Frederick. My mother called me to the side and asked me what I planned on doing. I just told her I'd not let things get out of hand. I went back home and thankfully I found my husband there. I told him that we needed him. We should stop letting such things get. I'm the way of our marriage. I apologized for kissing another guy in his presence, and then I told him why I did what I did. It was Frederick's turn to speak up. He didn't apologize or take accountability for pushing me to the point I'd ended up in. Not once in his long speech did he take responsibility for taunting me and baiting me to attend parties and cobes when he was aware that I preferred not to. He didn't accept the fact that he was wrong for forcing me to participate too. And that was all I needed to know, that I had married a conceited and egoistic man, and I was not ready to go down that lane. Instead of trying to work things out, he told me he wanted to get a divorce because he was not ready to accept what I did. My husband just dumped me right in front of me, and then he went upstairs to his room and brought out divorce papers. Initially, I wanted to talk him out of it, but when I realized that he had the divorce papers ready for a while, and he refused to tell me and just waited to get an apology like he was entitled to it, I decided that it was in my favor to dump the fool. I never expected something like that to lead to a divorce. It's literally not that deep, lol. I should be angry too, but I never tried to raise my voice and paint him as the bad guy. I always respected him, yet he kept on pushing me to the wall. I signed the divorce papers and tossed it on the table. He already signed it, so all he needed to do was go give them to his lawyer. I asked him for the $300 I was supposed to have for taking the bait, but he refused and called me greedy. Well, I didn't care and still don't care. If he wants to be petty and divorce me for something that was both our faults, I'd be petty all I want. I told him to keep it anyway, and that I'd get it from the spousal support. During our divorce proceedings, his lawyer offered the house in turn for the spousal support, but I refused. I don't need his house. My father's house is not closed to me. I did get the spousal support, and I didn't settle for less. He wanted a divorce, and I gave him one. I didn't ask for the divorce, he did, and his reason is just stupid. I got fired from the restaurant instantly, but I don't care. Ego, what's to work for their ex anyway? My father hasn't kissed a chance to tell me just how right he was. In fact, I think he prayed for this lull. My mom is the one who didn't like the idea of her firstborn girl being the first to get divorced. According to her, she wished I'll get the first and last to get divorced and that it never happens again. I pray too, and I hope I don't marry another Frederick redesigned. To all the guys out there, don't bait your wife to a truth or dare game if you don't want her to do something that could potentially disrespect you. It's common sense. Did I learn my lesson? Yes, I did. I should have refused to take the bait. That's where I was wrong. I should have just asked for a divorce, because any man that puts unnecessary pressure and comparison on his wife is no man at all. The same goes for women. Well, I'm back to working for my father, so the sack letter Frederick delivered to me doesn't change a thing. By the way, Frederick, if you ever get to see this, just know that you are the biggest mistake I ever made. Period. You know when you are married to someone who is always busy to even give you attention for a minute, or notice and appreciate everything you do, is hard. Sometimes you ask yourself why you get married, or how it would have been if you didn't get married. Not to your husband only, but how it would have been if you were not married at all. I just don't understand people who change after they get married. I mean, my husband, or must I say my ex-husband, was giving me so much love and attention before we got married. But after like a year into our marriage, he changed to be someone that I don't even know. It's more like I got a false advertisement of him. Lack of emotional connection and support in a marriage can lead you to try to find that connection elsewhere. I loved my husband dearly, but I just felt unappreciated and misunderstood in our marriage. As the years went by, he seemed to give me less and less attention. I started to wonder if I made the right decision marrying him. Every year, I thought he was going to change. We were emotionally distant while in the same place. He didn't look at me the same way he usually did. I tried to even change the way I looked, went to the gym, and even bought myself some new clothes so he could notice me. I would sometimes ask myself if he didn't find me attractive anymore, or maybe he had found someone else better than me. But why not divorce me or tell me straight in the face that you have lost attraction, or you no longer feel me anymore because stringing a person along, while you know that you no longer feel them or love them anymore, hurts more than receiving divorce papers or breakups and not getting any explanation for the separation. I don't know if you understand what I mean. Please help me understand why men do this to us, but get angry when we do it to them. So I, 33, met my husband, 42, on a plane coming back to California from London. He was sitting beside me, and we had a long conversation. It was lovely. Well, I had gone to London to attend my sister's wedding. Martin was a very smart, handsome, and funny man to be around. You know, when you just connect with someone on the first day of seeing or meeting them, that was me and Martin. We just clicked, you know. We had a lot in common and our goals collided. He was that missing piece I've been looking for all those years. We became friends. He would tell me a lot about his future plans and what kind of a woman he wanted in his life. Well, he had lost his wife a couple of years ago, and he found it really hard to move on because he looked for his wife in every woman he met. So he stayed single for 2 full years. We started dating after 3 months of being friends and spending more time together. And every moment was never a dull moment. It was great. He used to fulfill my desires and give me everything I needed from a man. He supported, and most of all, he understood. We got married after a year into our relationship. I wish I knew what happened to my husband that made him so disconnected. You know, before we got married, or let me say before we officialized our relationship, he used to tell me how much he appreciated me. His late wife was his everything, and he felt like he had lost one of his body cells when she passed on. He felt alone and somehow like he was lost without her. Then I came into his life and changed all that. He became the person he was when he was still with his wife, and that he felt so much alive and carefree again. Yes, his late wife would bring a good and happy side of him, but I was giving him more. I was charmed. Well, that was really charming. And then we started dating. I mean, he was also everything I needed in a man, and he was very understanding and loving. So I thought I had found the one, the love of my life. But I guess I was wrong. I loved my husband very much. Well, more like I still love him, but, you know, sometimes love alone is not enough. I'm not a woman who would cheat on her husband, but the way he had distanced himself from me, it made me feel like we were somehow losing connection. After a year and a half on our marriage, Martin started going out a lot. He would say he was going on a business trip, or if he was around, he would just focus on his work or go out with his associates and friends. I would be left alone in the house, all bored and lonely. Despite my efforts to communicate with Martin and express my feelings, he seemed to be too caught up in his own world to listen. I felt like I was living with a stranger, and the love and connection we once shared had vanished. I had been so patient with him, thinking he would change and become the person he was before he got married, you know. I had that hope because I would address the issue to him and would just apologize and promise to change. But after some time and years of not getting attention from my husband, I got tired of being an understanding and patient woman. So I started seeking that attention elsewhere, where I felt wanted and appreciated. One weekend, a friend of mine hosted a party, and that was where I met him, the man I cheated with. He was charming and handsome. He introduced himself as George Jackson. He was really funny, and he knew how to make a person forget their problems. From that moment we met, there was undeniable chemistry between us. He made me forget that I had a very huge and depressing problem in my house. My husband was depressing me to a point that I was sleeping with wine every night. George and I talked for hours, and I felt more alive than I had ever been in years. George was attentive and complimentary, showering me with affection. He understood a woman's needs and desires. He made me feel like I was a woman again and that I was not the problem. It was a lot, and I was drowning. As we were talking and laughing, George started telling me sweet things that would make any woman melt. But then I remembered that I was actually a married woman. We spoke more about ourselves. I even mentioned the problems I was facing in my marriage. He was kind and understanding, and he listened to me without judgment. He offered me a shoulder to cry on and a sympathetic ear, something that Martin had failed to do. Over time, George and I became close friends, and I found myself confiding in him more and more. He was always there for me, and he made me feel seen and heard in a way that Martin had not for years. So we started hanging out as friends, of course. As the months passed, my friendship with George grew stronger, and we started to develop feelings for each other. We began an affair, and I found myself feeling alive and desired for the first time in years. He had that dopamine over me that I was missing, and every moment with him was magical. I loved my husband, but this newfound excitement and admiration was intoxicating. I knew I shouldn't have done this, but the thrill of being desired by someone new was hard to resist. It felt like I was living in another dimension, It was really refreshing. The way Martin didn't pay attention to me, he didn't even notice what was happening in front of his eyes. I had thought he was going to notice some changes in me, or the way I was always out. I was no longer spending much time in the house, especially during weekends. I was always out with either George or by myself. That was how ignorant he was. I would always wonder what was happening in his head. But I got tired of being concerned. It was really hurting me that my husband was treating me the way he was treating me. We became more like housemates who share a bedroom and not husband and wife. I needed his time, attention, and affection, but he was too busy for that. I once had thoughts of him cheating on me or performing adultery on our marriage because of the way he was acting. What was hurting the most was that someone else was giving me the attention I had always longed for, the time I needed and affection, and it was not my husband. George was giving me an adrenaline rush, and he was making me happy. Putting a smile on my face and thinking about him would make me giggle. I don't even remember when was the last time I had felt like that. I was sure that even my soul had a dust of sorrows because I was no longer happy with my husband. George had that effect on me that I couldn't even explain, but it was there. Sometimes when my day wasn't a great day, if he didn't call or if I didn't see him at our secret spot, he surely knew what I've been missing. Was I too attached to George? Well, I think I was. One evening, George suggested we sneak away for a romantic getaway together. Martin had not been home for a couple of days. Well, it was more like he would come back from wherever he was very late, and I would be long asleep, then leave very early around 6 a.m, and I would still be sleeping. I had never been on a real vacation with my husband, besides on our honeymoon, which was cut short by an emergency that needed him at work. And the thought of escaping my mundane life for a weekend with George was enticing. I had to come up with an excuse to leave the house, so I texted Martin and told him that I was going out with friends for a weekend getaway. George booked a room at a hotel in the city just a few hours away. When we arrived at the hotel, he took my hand and led me to our room. He pulled me close and kissed me passionately. The moment was electric, and I melted into his embrace. I felt really great to feel someone giving you such attention. I couldn't even remember the day I last had an intimate moment with a male person or my husband. He would always come back tired to even touch me. The only thing he managed to do was giving me a perk when he came back from work or going, and that was it. So it was actually a very good feeling and escape for me. George and I spent the entire weekend exploring the city and getting to know each other better. George showered me with compliments and made me feel like the most desirable woman in the world. It felt so right at that moment, like there was nothing wrong. My weekend with George was what I had really needed. It was truly therapeutic for me. So as we were exploring the city, George had suggested that we go to the beach. Since it was hot, so the weather allowed, we went to the beach. He then asked me to swim with him. I was a bit hesitant at first, but he begged me, and I couldn't resist his begging, sexy eyes. So I eventually agreed, so we swam together. As we were swimming together in the ocean, I felt a rush of excitement and guilt. I knew that what I was doing was wrong, but I just couldn't help myself. I was tired of feeling ignored and unappreciated by my husband, and this handsome George guy was making me feel alive again. After the swim, George and I went back to the hotel room and spent the night together. It was a passionate and intense encounter, and I felt like I had finally found the attention and affection I had been missing from my husband. George was so gentle with me. He appreciated and complimented my body in a way that I felt like living my true self. He took me to another planet. I was feeling all sorts of tingles and butterflies inside me. As our weekend together came to an end, I knew I had crossed a line. I was falling for George, but I also loved my husband. I felt guilty about what I had done and wondered if I should confess everything to him or not. But confessing was going to ruin a lot of things and destroy my marriage. It was like I was stuck between a rock and a very hard place, and I didn't even know how to get out of the situation. As much as I loved my husband, but sometimes I find myself feeling particularly lonely and unappreciated. So one summer day, it was my husband's 42nd birthday, so I had decided that I would throw a party for him. Not just because he was turning 42, but I wanted him to focus on one thing. That time, George had gone to visit his family in Washington, D.C., so I had no one who was going to give me any attention, even though he would call to check up on me. So I wanted to make my husband at least pay attention to me and rethink about our marriage because I had that feeling that said it was over. Because of the way he was never home, nor giving me attention. I had invited his friends, family, and associates for his surprise 42nd birthday party. So I was busy preparing for my husband's birthday party. I had planned everything, from all of his favorite foods and decorations. Yes, I was feeling about what I was doing with George, but I also needed my husband's time and attention, so the party was going to give me that, even if it was for a day. I was somehow anxious and so excited to see the look on his face when he walked into the living room and saw all of his friends, associates, and family gathered there, waiting to celebrate him. Later on, he came back and was pretty much surprised. I was happy to see that surprised look on his face, and it was exactly what I had been hoping for. I saw it on his face that he was happy, even though I was not. The party went well, but I was bored and missing George. Martin was busy with his friends and associates. He didn't even come to say thank you for the surprise party. I felt so unappreciated and unnoticed. Later on, people left and I went to put on my sexy number, lingerie, to bring back the spark and love in our marriage. And guess what happened? He came to the bedroom, went to take a shower, then he slept. He even snored. It was really heartbreaking because I was trying to fix my marriage so that I would forget about what I was doing with George, but my husband was not even getting the hints of everything I did, or was trying to do. I had hoped that he would at least notice every effort that I was putting on our marriage, but I guess I was in it alone. The following morning, I made sure to wake up early so that I would catch him before he left for work. Luckily, I found him not even dressed. He didn't look like a person who was going to work, so I asked him to give me a moment with him because we needed to talk. I was shocked when he agreed to have the talk with me, because in my mind I had already told myself that he was going to make an excuse so that he would avoid the talk I wanted to do. So as we were talking, I told him everything that had been hurting me in our marriage and how much he never gave me any attention or affection. He told me lots of excuses, telling me that the reason he was busy was because he was trying to grow his business for our future, and that he didn't want his children to suffer when he passed on, so he had to secure their future legacy. I just didn't believe his lame and lousy excuse because we didn't even have children, and yet he was talking about our children's future legacy. I mean, how we were even going to make children if he was the kind of person he was. I am sure that if we had children, they were going to suffer like I was. They were not going to get his attention like I was. So somehow I thanked God that he didn't bless us with any children. If he was still the Martin that I had met on a plane back from London, then I would have said that he would be a great father because he was a great boyfriend and life partner at that time. Until he was not, and that happened after we had been married for a year, and some months. We talked and he apologized, promising me that he would change and would try to be a better husband. There was progress, right? That day we had spent the day together, watching movies and doing lots of lovemaking during the day. He then told me to get ready because we were going out. Wasn't I the happiest woman? I was over the moon. I had thought that my man was finally back. That day I managed to forget about George and enjoy the moment with my husband. Later on, we went out to have dinner, and it was really great going out with him. I had missed my husband a lot. Days passed. He was the loving, caring, affectionate, and funny Martin that I had fallen in love with. We made lots and lots of love. George had tried calling several times, but I had put my phone on silent because I didn't want any disturbance when spending time with my husband after a long time of trying to get his attention. He had also started noticing me, complimenting, giving me his time and attention. The guilt was there because I knew that deep down, if my husband was to find out about my abomination with George, my efforts would have gone to waste. A lot would be ruined, so I prayed that he does not find out. About 2 months later, I found out that I was pregnant. I was shocked and somehow happy because it was obvious that the child was my husband's, forgetting that I had slept with George also about a week before I fixed things with my husband. I told my husband about the pregnancy, and he was ecstatic. I had never seen my husband that happy in a very long time, and it made my heart at peace. I had broken things off with George because I had fixed things with my husband, and I didn't want any destruction in the process of fixing my marriage with Martin. As expected, George was angry. Well, angry was a small definition of how he was. I can say he was furious because after I had broken things off with him, he threw tantrums and insults at me, telling me that I had led him on. Then I was dumping him like a used toilet paper just because my husband had decided to come back to his senses. I didn't understand his anger because in whatever that we were doing, we had never titled it or officialized any relationship going on between us. It was just friends who also helped each other in one another's desires. Yes, I had caught some feelings, I won't lie on that, but then it was not feelings of love, but it was feelings of lust, so I didn't really understand his outburst. Maybe I might have led him on, but that didn't give him the authority to call me names just because I had fixed things with my husband. Was I wrong to do that? Was it unfair? So as months passed, my tummy was growing. My marriage was where I had wanted it to be. My husband was back, showering me with so much love and attention. I enjoyed and loved every moment of it. On the other hand, George was becoming a bee in the ear. He was threatening me a lot. I tried ignoring him, but he was persistent about exposing our little affair and telling my husband what had been happening behind his back. Another side of me was scared because I didn't understand the sudden obsession he had over me, while the other side wanted to just hire a hitman and finish him because he was not just threatening me, but also my marriage. During those months, I remember it very well, I was going with my husband to do baby shopping. We bumped into George, and an unexpected thing happened. George greeted us. Him and my husband looked like they had known each other for quite some time, the way they were talking to each other. I was so uncomfortable and prayed that George does not spill the beans to Martin because if he did, my marriage would be over. Martin introduced George as his business partner. Mind you, I had never met or knew any of his business partners, so it came as a shock to me. About a year later, I had already given birth to a very handsome baby boy, but a strange thing happened. The baby looked like George. My husband didn't notice at first because he had always wanted to have a child, but because of his busy schedule, he didn't have time, his words not mine. That time, I had already known that George was the father of the child, but I couldn't burst my husband's happy bubbles and ruin my marriage because of George, so I kept everything a secret. Months passed, my husband went back to his old absent self, and he would come home late and go to work very early. I didn't understand what was going on with him because if I asked him, he would be closed off and say it was just work. That really took me back to missing George, but I would remember that he was Martin's business partner, so if I were to go back to him, it would be too risky. So it was just me and my son. I felt like my marriage had finally come an end. You know, when you have that feeling that notifies you that something is wrong, and it is the end of everything. That was what I felt like. There was something big coming, and I won't be able to survive it. So one day I had posted my baby boy on social media, and it didn't even take 5 minutes to receive a call from George shouting at me, threatening me, and asking me why I hid his child from him. I didn't understand the sudden anger he had, so I denied the child being his, even though deep down I knew that the baby was his, and there was pure and solid evidence. My son didn't even need any DNA to prove that he was George's son. In my heart, I wanted and wished it was not his child but Martin's, but I guess what happens in the dark always finds its way to the light. George had gone from being obsessive over me to wanting his child, or else he was going to tell my husband. I was stuck in a very difficult and tight position because Martin was happy that the child was his. Even though he had suddenly changed and became the cagey and distant Martin, the only person he paid attention to, even though it would be for a few minutes, was our son. I once had a feeling that maybe his behavior was caused by George. Maybe George had told him about our affair, and whenever I would think about it, it would bring shivers down my spine. I didn't want my husband finding out about my abomination with George, but the way things were happening, there were a lot of possibilities that it might come out anytime, and it was not going to be nice. A lot would be destroyed. My conscience was not at peace, as the thoughts of losing my husband were always popping up in my head. The tension that was happening in my house was slowly affecting my child, because I would sometimes neglect him and drink my wine. I even opted to find him a nanny, which was very helpful because I was not fit enough to mother my baby. The guilt was eating me up, the regrets I was feeling. I wished I could take back the hands of time and undo everything. I wished I could reverse the cheating and get pregnant for George. On the other hand, George was adding another problem to the problems I had. So one night, Martin came back from work early, and he asked to speak with me in our bedroom. I had a little hope that maybe he wanted us to talk about our marriage and find a solution to whatever that was going on and work on it, only to be asked if there was something I wanted to tell him. I first didn't understand what his question was referring to, so I told him that I didn't understand what he was saying. I saw it in his face that he was trying to hide his anger, but because I knew my husband, I knew that he was angry and wouldn't just ask me if there was something I had wanted to tell him. I meant only one thing, that either George told him about the baby and our affair, or he had found out all by himself. As we were still talking, he asked me if I knew what I wanted. Again, I was so lost, so he proceeded by dropping a huge bomb at me. He told me that he had been thinking of giving me space and time to think about what I had wanted and be able to tell him whatever I was hiding. So he gave me a week to come clean with everything before he finds out himself. I knew there and then that I had to clean up my chest and tell him everything. But stupid me, I decided to just lie and mix the story. I was scared and didn't want to lose my husband, so I told him that I had kissed a stranger in the club because I was going through a lot and he was not there. I saw it in his face that he didn't believe me, so he told me that he would be moving out and he would be back once I was ready to tell him everything, and he was giving me a week to do that. I was shaking in my boots because I had thought I asked George to keep everything a secret until I had figured something out regarding the child. Well, I guess he didn't listen and ran to tell Martin everything. Now my marriage is over because of his obsession and big mouth. George ruined my marriage, and I knew that there was nothing I could do to save it. The damage was too major. Martin moved out of the house, and I felt like he took a piece of my heart with him. That night I cried until I couldn't anymore. So I resorted to wine, which I had thought was going to help me, at least, to be able to sleep. Instead, I kept having flashbacks of my moments with Martin, our happy moments till the time he started changing, and I resorted to cheating because I didn't have my husband's attention, so I went to seek it outside our marriage. And it didn't even end well because it took the only man who had shown me true love. A week passed, and I had not spoken to Martin. Surprisingly, he came over to the house and told me that he had ran an investigation regarding our child because he looked nothing like him. So during his investigation, he found the most shocking things, and he had thought I would come clean to save our marriage. But my silence and lies showed that I didn't appreciate and didn't care whether our marriage was ending or not. That time, my heart and conscience had told me that I had lost my man because of a lie, and I slightly cheated because he was no longer paying any attention to me. What shocked me the most was when he opened his laptop and showed me the pictures of me and Martin at the hotel when we went on a weekend getaway. My mouth went dry, my heart beating outside my ribcage. There was nothing to even deny there because all the evidence of the affair was there. As I was still in awe about that, he took out an envelope that had paternity results. I don't even know when he had took them, but I guess he did. So he asked me to open them and read out loud what had been written on the paper. I did as he told me, but the way it was so hard to do that, I wished the earth would just open and swallow me. He was very angry to a point that he had a vein coming out of his forehead. On the other hand, I was busy crying and apologizing for everything, but I knew that my apologies were not going to change anything. It was like the more I cried, the more I was fueling his anger. I was increasing his rage to a scale that I would never wish to see ever again. I tried begging him, even kneeling in front of him like he was my god, but instead of shouting or at least slapping me, he just told me that I would regret the day our paths even came across, which really puzzled me and left me scared of the outcome of everything. He told me that he wanted nothing to do with me and I should expect divorce papers in a few days. Months later, I was going through a very rough time. I was depressed, swimming in regrets and sorrows. I wished I had done things a different way. My husband had left me with nothing but a house. I didn't know where to start picking up the pieces of myself and move on. George had also filed for full custody of a child, so I had nothing and no one to be left with. It really hurt a lot, but because I had let everything upon myself, there was nothing else to do rather than trying to move on and become the better person. Not for myself only, but for my child. Because George had won the full custody case, because I had been drowning myself in alcohol and didn't have time for my child. I was devastated by the breakup, but I knew that it was time to pick up the pieces of myself and try to fix them. I had to move on and find happiness on my own terms. I started therapy to work through my feelings and to learn how to love myself again. So as I navigated my journey of healing, I realized that I had been living a life that was not true to myself. I had been trying to fit into a mold that society and my husband had created for me, and I had lost myself in the process. With the help of my therapist and my newfound self-awareness, I started to rediscover my passions and interests. I started taking art classes, joined a book club, and even started a new business. I was finally living the life I had wanted, and I felt empowered and free. As time passed, I bumped into Martin, and to my surprise, I didn't feel any sort of emotions or anything. So we greeted each other, and he asked me to join him as he was going to grab something to eat. Our conversation was solid and civil. He then told me that he was heartbroken by the breakup and what had happened to our marriage, but he eventually realized that he had been just as responsible for the demise of our marriage. He had been so caught up in his career that he had neglected me. He started therapy to work through his own issues. I was really happy that he had finally realized that I was not the only problem in our marriage. As much as I had done the most cruel and unforgivable thing that ended our marriage, but he was actually the cause of everything. He was the root of my behavior. Yes, I should not be condoning what I had done, and I regret it every day. But the circumstances that I was facing had led me to resort to cheating. I was not going to seek attention and affection outside our marriage if Martin was giving me enough time, like how he was giving his friends and associates. He made me feel less important, and like I was his second best. His friends and associates came first, to a point that he preferred spending more time with them than his own wife. I would sometimes ask myself why he married me, if he wanted to make me a furnisher of the house and not give me any attention, because that was how I felt, like I was an object or a home security guard. But despite everything that had been done, I finally managed to forgive myself and forgive Martin also. I also managed to get fair custody of my child, and that was the most refreshing and happy moment for me. Martin and I both found happiness on our own terms. We learned that true love and connection require effort and commitment. One thing I vowed to embrace was getting a second chance with my child and be the best mother to him. So as I had told my story, please tell me if what I did to my husband was worth it, or the way I dealt with my husband's absence was good. I don't even know what I should have done to prevent everything, but what is done right. Please help me with techniques of moving forward in case I find love again, so that I would not repeat the same mistake as that I did.